A major update. A jail maintenance worker is under arrest in New Orleans, accused of being the man on the inside who helped 10 inmates escape. The worker allegedly turned off the water to allow the inmates to break open a hole and get to freedom. Now, on the outside, the search continues for several inmates. Another escaped New Orleans inmate is back in custody. This one's accused of attempted murder. And we have the moment his arrest was caught on camera. This image per WVUE on Instagram. He and several other inmates made a jailbreak that has been seen by millions on security camera footage from a jail in New Orleans. The majority of the men that you see running free are still on the run right now, including multiple accused of murder.
There is no way people can get out of this facility without there being some type of lapse in security. There's no way. It's almost impossible, not completely, but almost impossible for anybody to get out of this facility without help from the outside.
That video, per WWL-TV, the sheriff, says it would take a lot to escape her jail. But what the inmates apparently wrote on the wall on their way out begs to differ. And now hundreds of members of law enforcement across multiple states are on the hunt for those still at large. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. The local sheriff in New Orleans said that she would be investigating her staff to see if those inmates had any help in their escape from her jail. And it turns out that a maintenance worker is now under arrest, accused of helping turn the water off, which played a key role in allowing those 10 inmates to escape. Sterling Williams is 33 years old. He's a maintenance worker at the jail, and he allegedly turned off the water, which allowed the inmates to move the toilet in front of the hole that they carved into the wall. This is his mugshot per the Louisiana Attorney General. An inmate allegedly told Williams to turn the water off, and the Attorney General says instead of reporting that inmate, he turned the water off, allowing the 10 to carry out their plan. Williams is now booked on 10 counts of principal to simple escape and 1 count of malfeasance in office. Jail records show he is not being held at the facility where he once worked, but is now being held in a separate parish. Here are those inmates, and at the time of this recording, you can see several of the 10 are still on the run, and there are major questions about what kind of help these inmates may have received to pull off this jailbreak, and there's also questions about who may be helping them on the outside. I want you to look at this picture. This is of Robert Moody, one of the first inmates to be arrested after the jailbreak, and you can see when he was arrested, he wasn't in prison garb anymore. He found street clothes. Moody only made it, though, about 7 miles from the jail. Moody was in jail on weapons and drug charges. Another inmate that was taken back into custody, also wearing full street clothes, ready to blend in with everybody else, was Kendall Miles. This is a screen grab from video posted by the group Project NOLA, which run cameras throughout the city and uses facial recognition technology in hopes of cutting down on crime. This is Kendall Miles walking through New Orleans' French Quarter. That is right in the heart of the tourist district of the city. Here's Miles being taken back into custody by Louisiana State Police. They say that Miles tried to run when they spotted him. The French Quarter, again, only a short distance from jail, so no one really has made it, it seems, that far from the jail when they were arrested. According to WDSU-TV, Miles is facing charges of attempted murder and carjacking for allegedly shooting a victim twice and taking his car. Another inmate captured is DeKeenan Dennis. He was arrested in the same area of New Orleans as Robert Moody, just about 7 miles from the jail, and Dennis is accused of armed robbery and illegal possession of weapons. Then there's Gary Price. He's accused of attempted murder as well. He was captured in East New Orleans. He was found in a vacant home. KVUE got this surveillance image from a home. They posted it on Instagram. This is from across the street, and you can see in the top left corner of your screen, law enforcement taking Price back into custody. None of the inmates who at this point have been captured made it that far from the jail they escaped from. But a big problem for law enforcement is just how long of a head start they had because of how long it took the sheriff and her deputies to realize that 10 inmates were gone from their jail. This is video from from the Orleans Parish Sheriff posted on social media showing inmates around midnight on May 16th. And you can see the inmates yanking on a jail door to break it open. And also some inmates walk by, some act like they don't see anything. Others eventually come over and help that inmate in orange break it open. And it only took less than a minute and a half from the beginning of that inmate yanking that door to it eventually breaking open and then the inmates being able to get in through that cell door. Obviously, when you're watching this, you might be asking yourself as well, where are the guards? And is anyone watching this video? I'll get to that in just a moment. But as this video continues on, as soon as the door breaks open, the inmates pile into one of the cells and then out they go through the back, as you see in the video here. The next piece of video may be hard to see here as well, but we'll zoom in on it. We'll show you, you can see some of the inmates running across a highway as they make their way away from the jail. Now, as to why it didn't seem like there were any guards that were watching any of this play out, what looked like in plain sight in the video when you watch it, well, the sheriff says the person who was responsible for watching the overnight feed of video stepped out to grab a bite to eat at the time that those inmates started their escape. It wasn't until 8:30 the next morning that authorities realized that 10 inmates were gone. Remember, what we just showed you of that escape, that was around midnight the night before. Now, this is what the authorities found in the jail cell. That toilet pulled back, pushed aside, leaving a big hole for the inmates to get out. And also, as you probably have seen by now, the inmates left some parting words for the sheriff and the deputies and the guards and everybody who ran that jail facility, like, quote, "Too easy, LOL," and also a smiley face with its tongue out and some more colorful language that we can't show you on air here. Now, it wasn't until later that day that the local sheriff posted this on her X account, letting the public know about the jailbreak. The hours it took for authorities to let the public know that violent offenders were on the run, that has created a lot of anger in New Orleans, and a lot of people are criticizing the sheriff. The sheriff also said that they're investigating their own staff to see if these inmates got any help from the inside. The sheriff's also blaming defective locks for the break. Here's part of what she said in this video per Fox News.
We're still gathering information. We are investigating our own to find out exactly what happened and where those lapses were. But there were supervisors on duty. There were lower level folks on duty, and they all had a job to do.
The authorities also say the inmates used blankets to get over the barbed wire on the outside fencing. Of the inmates that are left, 4 of them are charged with second-degree murder. Corey Boyd, Lenton Van Buren, Jermaine Donald, and Derek Groves. Groves killed 2 people on Mardi Gras in 2018. He also shot 2 others. He was convicted of that crime last year, and he was awaiting sentencing, which is why he was at the jail and not in a state DOC facility. WWL TV reports that the families of his victims, they've gone into hiding, and they also say the authorities never contacted them about him escaping. Lenton Van Buren is another one of the murder suspects at large. He was arrested in 2021 for a murder. He's pleaded not guilty. Jermaine Donald is accused of second-degree murder, and Corey Boyd is charged with second-degree murder for allegedly shooting a man who tried to stop a car burglary, according to NOLA.com, in 2024. Not only are murder victims' families going into hiding, but also the local district attorney in New Orleans told local media that he has staff members leaving town with their families because some of the people who escaped are people who they prosecuted. There is plenty of blame likely to go around for how this could happen, but specifically who should be blamed for this depends on who you ask in New Orleans right now. The sheriff is taking a lot of heat. There are calls for her to resign. She, though, says this jail has had problems that go beyond her job. She says the jail is only 60% of the staff that it needs. She also believes that the inmates may have had help from the inside. As far as why it, though, took so many hours for her agency to let the public know that these violent offenders were free, she claims they needed time to figure out what happened once they realized the inmates were gone, which again was several hours after the jailbreak. Louisiana's governor is putting a lot of the blame on those who are in charge of the jail, and that includes the sheriff. Here is part of what he said per Fox.
I've also ordered the Department of Corrections to audit the Orleans Parish Correctional Facility for compliance with basic jail guidelines.
Nowadays, after the inmates became fugitives, the reward is rising for people to come forward with information on the whereabouts of the remaining fugitives. Right now, the FBI is offering a $10,000 reward, and the ATF and Crime Stoppers are also offering rewards of $5,000. Another issue, according to the governor, is that several of the inmates were set to be transferred to a state prison to serve sentencing, but they were still being held in the jail facility, which is meant to be temporary. The governor said all DOC inmates at that facility are now being moved out. As for the fugitives who have been caught thus far, they are being taken to facilities away from New Orleans. The state police posted these pictures of Gary Price being taken to what they said was a, quote, secure state facility. Joining us now to talk about this is Justin Paperny, prison consultant. Thank you for taking the time to be with us here on Law and Crime. I guess since this story started, just what has shocked you the most when you see, especially that video of all of the inmates running out the back of the prison, or the jail, excuse me?
What shocks me is the terrible infrastructure within these prisons, and everyone knows that these things could happen. People talk about them, but there's no correction or change. Then what does not surprise me is the continuous blaming. You have the sheriff blaming somebody else, the governor blames somebody else. Without accountability and change, these things are going to continue to happen. These prisons and jails, they're broke down. The infrastructure is terrible. There are protocols that are not followed. And you have prisoners who will study the routines of guards, what time they go to work, how engaged are they, what time do they open the doors. And without proper protocols, you have people convicted of violent crimes able to escape. Until there's accountability and change at the top, we can expect more of these escapes threatening communities across the country.
Yeah, because the headline video out of the gate was people running out the back of the prison, and that was kind of, but to me, watching the first inmate yank on a door, and it took him about a minute 30 to break it open, and then they're all able to go into that cell, which is apparently where the hole was, and then get out. And I'm watching that, on one hand, how flimsy of a door that was, it takes a minute 30 to do it, but then where are the guards? What do you make of some of the staffing of this place?
Yeah, it's not the door. The door is the obvious blame, but the door could have been fixed a long time ago. What has not been fixed is this culture. So what happens is you have inside knowledge. So 16 years ago today, I was released from prison in a minimum security camp. Even in camps, dudes can walk off. They're not going to stop you. The difference is those are minimum security defendants. And for nonviolent crimes, in this case, these are I read murder, aggravated assault, very serious crimes. So what happened is there's inside knowledge. They are communicating together. They know the behavior and routines of staff. They wait for one mistake, one moment of laziness or nonchalantness or total disregard for their job, or they're going to seize this opportunity to escape, knowing they're going to have several hours. So they're studying for weeks and months, and then they seize that opportunity. And to have several hours go by without anybody knowing, if that doesn't tell you there was a terrible breakdown in protocols and structure and strategy, then we need to have another conversation. It was the inside knowledge that allowed this to happen.
What surprised me too is that, these are some inmates that are, in one case, one of them is convicted of a double murder, but others are accused of murder, attempted murder. These are seriously violent people, and they're being held at a jail. Why not be held at a state facility?
Myriad reasons, right? They could be waiting to get transferred there. The jails could have convinced themselves they're able to secure them. Oftentimes people get misclassified. Sometimes people go to the wrong prison. Mistakes are made when protocols aren't followed. So you can expect all of these agencies to say the same thing. We saw the same thing in MDC in New York with Diddy and Sam Bankman-Fried after Epstein, hung himself. There's going to be changes. There's going to be accountability. We're going to make new policy. Instead, it is blaming and excusing. It's nobody's fault. And as a result of that, someone convicted of murder and other crimes, they're out in the community now hoping and wishing that through lockdowns, reconstructing timelines, hopefully they get tips from the community that they're going to find these people. The problem is the longer these people are away from prison and not caught, the more violent and scary they actually become, because they're truly in need of resources. So it is a tone at the top issue, whether it's a federal, state, or local prison. And until these changes, we'll be on in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months talking about in escape in these broken down, dilapidated prisons and jails. And the blaming and excusing will continue.
Yeah, I want to get into some of the blaming and who's to blame for that, because we've heard, to the sheriff, it may be reasons it happened, but then you kind of hear it and it's excuses, especially when you think of how long it took them to actually realize that 10 inmates and some very violent
It's
people
absurd.
were missing. Another part is, and I know it's cliche in these conversations to bring up Shawshank Redemption, so forgive me, but you think of someone carving a hole in a wall in a jail and it's done very quietly, very secretly. How do you think they were able to do this? I mean, how difficult would it be to actually create the type of hole that they did behind the toilet to then escape out the back?
So it's not hard if they know they have 2 to 3 hours a day to dig this hole. It's not hard if they know the exact routine and vulnerabilities of prison staff. It's not hard if they know that the prisoner jail is understaffed. It's hard to get people to work there. People are underappreciated, underpaid, which can compel a staff member to go to a training to understand protocols, but they do not implement them. So in prison, I know because I was there, even though it was in a camp, you can study and learn the mannerisms of staff, guards, other prisoners, and you can create a routine around it. So it probably didn't take them. There was probably one leader that said, hey, there could be an opportunity here. Would you like to get involved? Sure, you're in for double murder. This is your only opportunity to see freedom again. Let's work together over the coming weeks and months until we get transferred to a higher security prison and take our opportunity. Then they team up, they partner, they study, they assess, and they chip away at it every single day. No different than Andy Dufresne did in Shawshank Redemption. And then it's like, we're ready. Let's party. Let's seize our opportunity. And they knew they had a window, and they're still free. They're doubling the reward from $5,000 to $10,000. Problems follow. They continue to be free. It is a total disaster and nightmare. And here's what I'm expecting at some point: someone to say, it's my fault. This will never happen again. Until then, they're never going to fix the infrastructure. Staff is going to be undertrained. They're not going to follow protocol. And I pray and hope someone in the community isn't hurt as a result of this failed leadership at this jail.
Is it uncommon, because going back to the inmate who was yanking on the door, I mean, is it uncommon in that area for there not to be a guard? I know it was after lockdown at 10:30, but the lights were still on and there didn't seem to be any authority figure whatsoever in the space where all these inmates were being kept.
It is not uncommon, right? Even in a penitentiary, people are going to go to bed, the lights are going to shut off, the cells are going to close. They knew exactly how much time they had to a T to make this hole in the wall. They knew when a guard would be walking by to do what's called a standing count. They knew exactly what was going to happen because they're studying the routines, the vulnerabilities, the tendencies of staff. So I can tell you down to a second, they knew how much time they had, and they were very calculated. And unfortunately for people in this community, they were successful.
And you kind of go into the sheriff. She's talked about, there was defective locks that were part of the problem, the staffing issues that, financially it would take millions of dollars to fix the doors. Why? And for as expensive as it is, I mean, I'm sure it wasn't a headline issue like this jail in New Orleans up until these inmates were leaving. If it was such a big problem, why wasn't it something that the sheriff would have talked about maybe in a campaign or had made a key issue in local politics for New Orleans, knowing that they were holding some very violent people there?
So when the lock is the visible issue, that's what people are going to blame. The invisible issue is this culture and the blaming. So of course, if she claims that she brought attention to this lock, if she even did, you're going to have the prison say, we're broke. We have no money for infrastructure. We don't have money for staff. And of course, you'll have prison or unions who want to hire more staff, more security. So again, you're going to continue to hear this. It was a broken lock. I brought attention to it. It's just the obvious issue. The real problem is staff isn't trained, protocols aren't followed, and you continue to have people blame. It's interesting. You talk about the millions of dollars that it would cost to fix these prisons and jails. Everyone appears to be concerned about public safety. What is the cost of one of these prisoners? They've only caught one, as I understand it. what is the cost if one of these prisoners hurts or kills someone? I can assure you it's worth more than millions of dollars plus the lawsuits to come. So it's sort of like penny wise, pound foolish, and then they're reactive. This will continue to happen. They're not fixing up jails. They're not properly training staff. They're not properly setting tone at the top. And in the end, I hope people in the community bring them forward. I have no doubt they have enablers who are absolutely helping them. So they're checking with I would say the Department of Justice or the marshals. They're checking with friends, family, old associates, gang affiliations. I mean, it is a absolute nightmare, and I hope people do the right thing and turn them in.
Yeah. And I also think too, with the kind of the millions of dollars argument, do you find like in your work when you see some of the facilities that are vulnerable because maybe they haven't been upgraded in a long time, that the public just doesn't have an appetite to spend the money on a corrections facility?
That may be the best question I've been asked in 2025. The answer is yes. I mean, you look at spending cuts across the country right now with Doge and others, spending cuts, cutting vital programs for people who are not in prison, which then means they're cutting vital programs for people in prison. There's very little sympathy for people in prison. People will say if you were so concerned about infrastructure or your health or the type of prison environment you were going to live in, you probably shouldn't have broken the law. So yes, there's only so much money we have. And the last thing they're going to do is allocate it to a prison and jail. If they had money, they'd want to hire more staffing and perhaps do better training, including some mental health training, not just for prisoners, but also for staff. And until these issues are resolved and fixed, it's just going to be a continued problem of blaming. And it's unfortunate. They don't recognize that spending some money now would lead to what they truly care about: security, control, and higher public safety, because it would ensure people can't escape. Now, in the federal prison system, they'll just close the prison. I served time in a prison in the BOP, Bureau of Prisons. I think deduced it would be $30 or $40 million to fix it. They're like, no good, we're going to close it. We're going to move these prisoners to another prison. That's fine. They should be closing them if they're not in a position to fix them. Don't house them there, because you have smart prisoners with criminal minds who can escape with lazy staff who turns the other way because they're not trained.
Do you also find, as far as like the appetite from the public, I would also think for a lot of the agencies that run a county jail, that it's a sheriff's office that's in charge of it, and they have a lot on their plate when it comes to law enforcement on the outside. Do you see the appetite also from a lot of these sheriffs to say like, okay, the jail, that's not something the public really comes in touch with, I would imagine, that they're not going to spend the money on the jail either, that you don't see the appetite from the sheriff to take action?
If they didn't have money to fix a lock or hole, okay, if they couldn't call a handyman to fix this, imagine their appetite for spending tens of millions of dollars to fix up a broken jail, right? Or prison, and then properly trained staff. No, it's easy to be reactive, to blame, claim things are going to get better. In time, unfortunately, we will forget about it until it pops up again, and we're going to be discussing it again. And the same people in a different state with the same DNA and makeup and career are going to say the same thing. It's just the way it is. People have asked me that. Could they have fixed it up? They could have fixed the hole. How much would that have cost? Had zero interest other than blaming. And I pray they are caught, because I'm telling you, the longer we've covered it, the longer they are free, the scarier they become, the fewer resources they have. And it could compel people with a criminal mind who have already killed to do it again, because they've tasted freedom, they like it, they want it, and they will do anything to keep it.
Yeah, Derek Groves, I believe, is the one who's been already convicted of a double murder, and Mardi Gras was awaiting sentencing, and he is out, and the families of his victims have gone into hiding, knowing that he is free right now. Lastly, for the people who have been caught at the time of this recording, there are 4 out of the 10 who are back in custody. What is the reality for them when they return to, they've been taken to what the state police call a secure state facility? What is that? What is life going to look like for them now compared to how they had it before?
Well, they're going to be admired or lionized by a lot of prisoners who said, I can't believe you escaped. Good for you. It's going to impress a lot of people. The prison or jail, they don't want to be embarrassed again. So there is going to be continuous lockdown, isolated, total segregation. They're not going to be going anywhere. And when sentenced, they're going to go to the highest security prison possible. Even in transit, which occasionally is where some escapes can happen when you're in shackles and chains, they will be looked at and treated differently because of this escape. So there's always going to be a mark on their back because of that, which eventually will lead, and I hope this brings people in the community some happiness. They will always be more isolated. There will be more scrutiny on them because of this escape. Even in a minimum security camp, you escape, they catch you, you're going to a higher security prison, you are fenced in. There will always be more scrutiny on them because of it. And of course, it will impact their eventual release or eligibility to go home based on this conduct. They will all be in prison longer because of it.
Yeah, that was going to be my last question, because there are certainly the ones who are convicted of attempt or accused of attempted murder, accused of murder, convicted of murder, but then there's also some drugs and guns offenses on here, and I don't know what their priors looked like, but there were people who they weren't going to spend the rest of their life in prison. How many more years could someone facing a drug and weapons charge, still very, very serious charges, but now they're looking at a longer sentence?
Right, you have the crime of escaping, and then you have potential crimes that have existed in the community: stealing, taking advantage of people, or robbing cars. You continue to pile onto the crimes. So then when you get sentenced, and we could argue drug sentencing in this country, both federal and state, has become more sympathetic. War on drugs has passed. Marijuana is legal in many states, including California. So something that could have been maybe 2, 3, or 4 years with good conduct, eligibility for an early release, now they have new charges in a higher security prison. Perhaps, look, when you're presented with an opportunity in prison, and I presume they were presented with an opportunity that said, hey, you can do 5 years, or we have some inside knowledge that tells us we're going to have at least 4 hours before they find out we've left. It's worth it, man. Roll the dice. Let's try. And they seize the opportunity, and there are going to be consequences. But you're absolutely right. Something that could be 2, 3, 4 years can now be 10 years in prison, in a higher security prison.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens. I mean, there's so many agencies across now multiple states in the South looking for the rest of the 10 inmates who have escaped. Justin Paperny, prison consultant. It's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for joining us to talk about this one.
Good to see you. Thank you.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Be sure to subscribe to us here on YouTube, as well as you can find our content on Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.